Well, welcome to Lesson 2 in Discipleship Essentials, Being a Disciple. I trust you have laid a good foundation in Lesson 1 on making disciples and seen the challenge of that. And as I said in the introduction here, Lessons 1 and 2 really set the tone for the entirety of this study of Discipleship Essentials. Now, if you are entering into this teaching today, it may feel like you have just jumped into the deep end of the pool and you have not had any swimming lessons. When we were growing up, of course, we learned to swim in a very gradual way. We hung on to our parents in the shallow end of the pool and got used to the water, or maybe they put us up on the edge of the pool and we jumped towards them and maybe did a little dog paddling. We got floaties on and you got the whole idea. But here, it feels like we were standing on the edge of the pool at the deep end. Somebody came along and gave us a shove and pushed us right into the water. And nobody gave us any swimming lessons to begin with. So here we are, because we are facing Jesus' call to be his disciple. When he lays out the bar, he calls us to step up to that. Now, this may seem a little out of sorts because we have made a distinction in the Christian church that I think is a false distinction between being a Christian or being a disciple. In fact, a woman approached her pastor after worship on Sunday morning. Apparently, this pastor had given a barn burner sermon on discipleship, and it did not sit well with her. And so she says to her pastor, "Pastor, I just want to be a Christian. I don't want to be a disciple. I like my life the way it is. Why do I have to be a disciple? I believe that Jesus died for my sins, and I be with him when I die. Why do I have to be a disciple?" So she saw this as a kind of multiple choice test. Christian, disciple, I think I'll choose Christian. Seemed less demanding to her. Why didn't she want to be a disciple? Well, she says, I like my life the way it is. So apparently, being a disciple would disturb her existence as it is now. Maybe it was the Africa thing. If I commit myself to God, he's going to send me someplace that I don't want to go. And what was her definition of a Christian? I believe that Jesus died for my sins, and I will be with him when I die. She saw no logical connection between what she understood a Christian to be, forgiven and eternal life, and being a disciple. That wasn't a part of the message that she had brought up with. And how did she come to this conclusion that she could be a Christian without being a disciple? Probably because of the gospel that she had been hearing a good portion of her life that drew this conclusion. And so she asked the question, why do I have to be a disciple? And this lesson is really an answer to that question, why you have to be a disciple. Because Jesus lays it out there, and he says, if anyone would come after me. Now, note who he's speaking to here when we look at Luke chapter 9. He's speaking to the crowds. He's not speaking to the elite special forces, not speaking to a small subgroup of those people who are the truly committed. No, he's saying to everyone, if anyone would come after me, here are the terms of discipleship. Yet in the church today, we sort of see this as extra credit. There are a few that just get it, and the rest are Christians, but there are a few who are our disciples. Now, in this lesson, we are going to observe an encounter that Jesus has with Peter and James and John, and the call for them to be disciples. And I want to introduce this by a quote from John Ortberg. He says, no one can be a disciple of Jesus because you think you should. You actually have to want it. Now, if there's simply sheer obligation of following Jesus, I have to follow Jesus, and it's a weighty thing, then you're not going to enjoy it, and nobody's going to want what you have. But John challenges us here with the question of, what's the want to? What's it going to compel us along into the one who we can follow? And I think we find an answer to that in this very dramatic story of Peter and Jesus and their encounter together. So let me set the scene. You'll be studying it a little bit later. And the scene is that Jesus is large gatherings, large followings. He's backing himself up against the Sea of Gennesaret, it's called, also the Sea of Galilee. And apparently the crowds are pressing in, and he's a little bit fearful of the press of the crowds. And so he turns to Peter and gets into one of his boats goes out with a floating pulpit, gives his teaching for the day. We don't even know what he taught because that was not what was important in this particular incident. And once Jesus is done with his teaching, he says to Peter, Peter, put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Now, Peter, it says here, has been fishing all night. He will say that. He's got exhaustion and sheer exasperation at this request. And so Peter doesn't even hide his irritation. He says, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. I like the way Eugene Peterson catches it in the Message. He says, Master, we've been fishing hard all night and haven't even caught a minnow. So I think Peter is just tired. He's the fisherman. He's looking at Jesus and saying, Jesus, I come from a long line of fishermen. I know something about fishing. Fishing is to be done at night, and this is the day. Fish can see these nets. They're not going to jump into these nets. Jesus, you stick to preaching. Let me handle the fishing. But no, out of sheer honor to Jesus as his master, he says, because you say so, I will let down the nets. I don't think in that moment Peter had any expectation that there was going to be a great catch of fish. But all of a sudden it was as if the signal went out. Every fish you get into that net, they had to go get an extra boat to try to haul in the catch of fish that was there. But the thing that I find important here is the reaction that Peter had to this incident. Now, when Peter saw that this is the greatest catch of fish that he had ever seen in his life, you might have thought that the dollar signs were going off in his mind. I could sign Jesus onto my fishing crew and we can make a mint. Get the lawyers, sign a contract, let's seal the deal here. But I think finances were about the farthest thing from Peter's mind at this point. Because what we see in Peter is that he is simultaneously disturbed and attracted. We read in verse 8, this is the key verse. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. There was this cognitive dissonance in his mind. At the one point, he was kind of pushing Jesus away, and the other point, he was attracted to Jesus. Clashing thoughts in his mind. I see him at one point getting out of that boat, was the great catch of fish, slogging through the water, running to Jesus, falling at his feet, holding on to his robe, attracted to him. But at the same time, he's in excruciating pain. He's sensing the moral discomfort in his own being as in the presence of the holy. Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man. As Eugene Peterson puts it, Master, I'm a sinner. I can't handle your holiness. I don't deserve to be in your presence. And I would submit that this push and pull, this revulsion-attraction dynamic, is the lifelong fascination that keeps us ever alive and under the formative power of Jesus. No one can be a disciple of Jesus because you think you should. You actually have to want it. And what does that want to? For you see, a relationship with Jesus, I believe, should come with equal amounts of fear and fascination. Can't live with him, can't live without him. As much as he affirms, he disturbs. As much as he calls for a singular focus, he complicates our decisions. His yoke is easy, but his way is hard. He's the confounding Christ. In this lesson, we will meet the Jesus who demands it all.